Welcome to The Space for It with Makayla and Jacob. We are two therapists working to navigate making space for what comes up as part of the human experience. Today, we're discussing grief and how it shows up maybe more often than we think.
That is very true. And I think it's something that we don't think about a lot, especially because our culture tends to be fairly dismissive of grief.
Mhm.
I think that's why we're also used to hearing things like get over it, just move on. You don't need to be sad about that. Think about all the good things. Like there are so many little mantras that you hear on a very regular basis that all kind of push us away from allowing ourselves to feel grief about any number of losses that we experience in life.
Yeah, I completely agree. And so, also to start, maybe we should define grief or see
Ooh.
how the internet defines grief.
How would you define grief, or do you want to go with the internet first?
I want to go with the internet first because I want to illustrate how it maybe is misleading, or how we
Mhm.
might think about it in a way, um, yeah, that doesn't encompass it all. So, just looking up grief definition on Google, the first thing that comes up is deep sorrow, especially that cause. This is funny. It's not even like accurately English, especially that caused by someone's death. Is what it says.
I, I think it is. I think it's how you're reading it because it's deep sorrow, especially that caused by someone's death.
Ah, yes, that makes so much more sense.
Hmm.
I was like, especially the cost. Yeah, no, the cadence makes a lot more sense. Okay, good job, Jacob.
Thank you.
So that's the first definition. And the next one is trouble or annoyance, such as we were too tired to cause any grief. People also ask, like, what's the best definition of grief? And that's where I feel like we get into something more actually aligned with, like, maybe what we could think of grief as. I think it'd be helpful. So that one is grief is the experience of coping with loss. Most of us think of grief as happening in the painful period following the death of a loved one. But grief can accompany any event that disrupts or challenges our sense of normalcy or ourselves. This includes the loss of connections that define us. What do you think about that definition?
I think that that's a lot. I think it's a lot closer to what I think about grief as, because it's more broad, but also it highlights one of our base needs as humans, which is connection, and then it connects the idea of grief to loss of connection.
Mm-hmm.
And so many of the things that we end up grieving are because of loss. And they're not all because of loss of connection or relationship. But still, I think when we have something, whether it is a relationship or a like vision for the future, or even I think even some things that we've worked towards in our lives, like if it could be jobs, it could be houses, it could be any other thing that you work really hard to achieve. It could be even be careers, thinking about it like that. But like when you work really hard to achieve something and then something happens and that's ripped away or it goes away or it's lost,
Yeah.
I think we experience grief.
100%. Yeah. So these, even just these changes, these big transitions or changes to what we thought was going to happen or what was happening that we really enjoyed. And so, yeah, I feel like that connection can be more than just to a certain person or a certain relationship, but it could be to a career or a job or a dream or a house if you're moving or things like that. I think it really is way more expanded than we give it,
Mhm.
than most people see it as.
There's so many different attitudes or perspectives towards what we do with it when we're feeling that. Because Western culture is not great at grief in general. We're not great at loss. We're not great at any of the emotions that we tend to look at as uncomfortable. Because when we see someone else experiencing them, rarely do you find somebody who's like, oh yeah, I want to sit with you in that. Like, I'm comfortable here. But also, when we ourselves experience them, so often we apologize for it. It's like, sorry, I'm having a bad day. Sorry, I don't feel really good. Sorry, I feel low. I'm bringing everybody down.
Mm.
And I think because it feels like something we need to apologize for, which we could have a chicken and egg conversation about whether that's because other people are uncomfortable with it and they push it away, or we're uncomfortable with it and that makes other people uncomfortable. Like, whatever the reason,
Mm-hmm.
it becomes this thing that's very isolating, but also that we try and push away from happening.
Yeah. And or that we just don't even recognize. Like, I think a lot of us, because our definition generally in this country is so narrowed to being like, after you lose someone, that's when you grieve. I feel like so many of us go through all these changes and disruptions and challenges, and we don't, and then we have the anger and the frustration and the irritability and low mood and just all of these different things, when it's like, when those are all coming together, like, that's grief. And if we don't recognize it, like, what do we do with it? Or does it get stuck? Or how do we move through it if we can't name it?
For me, that brings up the thought of like why naming it matters. And I think a lot of why it matters that we acknowledge when we're experiencing grief is that we benefit from actually making space for the emotions that we feel. And grief brings a lot of, like, it brings sadness, it brings pain, it brings like the feelings, like it brings a whole host of feelings. But if we don't allow ourselves to actually make space for those things, a lot of the time we don't actually end up working through them. Like, one of the stages of grief, if you look at like the 5 stages of grief, is the anger stage. And that's a great example of one that I think we're really good at invalidating. Because we're like, what is being angry going to do? And in a lot of cases, it's like, well, I don't know. It could validate the experience of like, I wish they were still here, or I wish I hadn't lost that, or I wish I still had fill in the blank. But also, if you look at the thing that I think a lot of us are grieving right now, where we're looking at what's currently happening and we're like, this is really sad, there's a lot of harm happening, anger can be very motivating. Be like, okay, let's build something different.
Well, and I think part of naming it is understanding that it's not coming out of nowhere, that there's a connection to something that matters to us, whether it's a value or, like we were talking about, a dream or a relationship or something there. It's like being able to see these emotions as connected to something else that matters, I think gives it a whole different feeling than if it's just like, I'm just irritable and I have to apologize for it, or I'm not allowed to show up because I'm sad, or I'm, like kind of low mood. It's like, well, no, this makes sense. Like, I care about this thing. This thing is not happening the way that I thought it would, or not happening anymore. Or even right now, like you were saying, with everything going on, like right now, I think a lot of the grief for a lot of people is this change of what's normal. And this disruption to kind of our social norms that is happening. And being able to label that as being like, wow, like we kind of maybe took that for granted, and now it's changing, and we can see that it can change. It's like, okay, what do we do now? Like this we have all these emotions now, and what do we do with them? How do you help people process grief, or what do you think is helpful in processing grief?
The fundamental idea behind a lot of what I do is, let's make space for it. Very fitting. Because when we don't deal with it. And so when I'm working with somebody and I start to hear like, oh, there's a loss here and we're feeling that, I'll call attention to it. I'll be like, it sounds kind of like you're grieving. Like I hear in what is being said all of the feelings that come from something was here, something was this way, someone was around, and now they're not. And let's allow ourselves to actually bring attention to what that means. Let's allow ourselves to actually explore how that feels, and let's hold that. Because a lot of the time with grief, you can't just bring back what's gone. And so you have to, like, I'm a narrative therapist, which means I'm always talking about the story. You have to figure out what your story looks like now that it's different, and how your current story connects back to the story that once was, and is still the story that you're continuing to live out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like that perspective. Because I think we're all, and thinking about it, maybe not everyone reads books anymore, but we all watch movies, pretty much everyone. And thinking of even that's a narrative, too. Um, I wonder if even like imagining your life as a movie and watching it kind of play out, it's like, what kind of movie do you want it to be? Like, you're at this point in your story where this thing has just happened, and there's all sorts of different movie plots that you could choose from of like, this is the catalyst to me doing this thing in my life, where like this can have a lot of meaning even in all that pain. Maybe that's why it can have meaning. It's like, yeah, so what would you choose if you could choose? Like, what kind of movie plot would you choose for yourself?
I don't think you have to stick with just one plot.
There you go.
I think that different seasons, like right now, my life is this season of just
chaos,
slow, challenging chaos of like every day I wake up and I'm taking care of kids and I'm trying to clean the house and I'm trying to get everything done. And it's never ever done. And somebody is always sick and somebody else is always getting sick and somebody's getting better. And like, we're in the phase of perpetual, like, that's just how it feels. But it hasn't always been this way, and it won't always be this way. And I think what's interesting is that I could say I want my story to be like a rom-com. Because if I was going to pick any movie to watch on any day, it would probably be a rom-com because I love how they make me feel. Like,
yeah.
they are just light and happy and fun, and I love that. And I think you can find elements of that in, like, yesterday I was at the beach and I was playing with my 3 kids who are like all older, and we're playing in the sand, and it's just delightful. Like when everybody gets along and we're having fun and like that is so fun, and there's joy and lightness in it. Yeah. But in the same breath, when I try and leave the beach, like I'm over the sand thing, like I'm over the sand. When you go to the beach, you're going to get sandy. But still, there's this element of like me trying to get 3 children from an infinite beach in either direction into a car is like, okay, we're going to go. They all run away. Okay, yeah. let's all collect. And suddenly the theme is like frustration and annoyance.
Yeah. And this is the part in movies where they generally cut to the next scene.
Yeah.
They don't show these parts. Yeah.
But and that's where it's like, I think in any given period of your life, there's what the theme would naturally be. And I think you can have this kind of overarching, like, I'm an optimist. I aim to find joy. I aim to find these things. And that influences the tone of it. But, I mean, every season is going to be different.
That's fair. So maybe as we're talking about grief, like for this event or this season of life where this is happening, what would I choose? What would be meaningful to me to like work towards or show up as, or yeah. But yeah, I agree.
I would also add that when I personally spend a lot of time in a more sad place, like that changes everything about how I can function. In that I head towards depression. I head in a place of like, I don't have energy. I don't have motivation. I'm not interested. I just feel kind of defeated and low. And I don't like spending a lot of time there. And therefore, I more recently, like in the last few years, when I'm experiencing that, I try to appreciate it a little bit. But I also have worked very hard to try and figure out what are very tangible ways that I can pull myself out of that when I'm getting there. Which I think that's the other piece of grief, is that I don't think very many people like feeling grief.
Yeah.
Even though it's valuable, even though it's necessary to work through something well, we have to allow ourselves to feel it. We don't really like it.
I'm curious too, because I think for me this has changed a lot as I've learned to watch thoughts and emotions and things kind of arise and fall away naturally. To understand that I know this is impermanent, and I know it's like something coming and going, or even like I use the language of like it's visiting me. that has changed it completely. Like that
Mm-hmm.
piece, but then also that piece of like, there was something really that mattered to me here. And like, as hard as it is to feel, I don't want to not feel it because like this thing really mattered. But I think in knowing that it's part of the process to go through it, to experience these emotions, they're not bad emotions and they will pass. The like I guess that's like three things that I've learned that there's a lot in there. Um, but that make it a lot more I'm a lot more willing to experience that because it's just part of life and I don't need to push it away because it's not a bad thing. Um, but I think a lot of us too, if we don't have those practices or experiences or awareness that is a way of a perspective we can take, or an understanding we can have, then a lot of us think we will get stuck there. We will just end up in depression. We will, like, it'll last forever is kind of what I hear sometimes. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so how do we get to a place where we're willing to feel this thing that's really uncomfortable and unpleasant?
I think what you highlighted there is so valuable, that it is temporary.
Mhm.
Like no feeling we have, whether we like it or we don't, will last forever.
Yeah.
And therefore, like if we allow ourselves to engage with it, it will be temporary.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really big part of allowing grief to be a thing. Because when you know it's going to be temporary, like when you know at some point I will not feel the exact way I do right now. You don't know how long that's going to be. Like,
Mm-hmm.
depending on what it is, could be days, weeks, months. But
Years.
still, years also.
Comes and goes.
but still, like, life is dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
It's always changing.
Well, and that's an interesting paradox that like I hear as you say that too, because if we're letting it come and go, that is a very different experience, and it does generally come and go. It changes the dynamic. When we push
Mm-hmm.
it away, because it's part of us, it's within us, we can't really push part of us away because you can't outrun yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we prolong it. So it's this weird paradox of mind of like, I don't want this, it's uncomfortable, I want to get rid of it. In doing that, in trying to get rid of it, we actually prolong those feelings. Um, and they last a lot longer. They can last years and years, and not change very much in that time if we're never addressing them.
Mm-hmm.
So the paradox is like when we move towards them and sit with them and make space for them,
Mm-hmm.
we allow them to come and go more naturally. And it comes in waves. So like we could have a really intense bout of feelings for a little while. And then if we know as we breathe out, it goes. And then a year later, a month later, a week later, like after we've been feeling fine for a while, it might come back because we remember that thing and it still matters to us. And but that's part of the process too.
One of the metaphors I always use to kind of drive that idea home
Mm-hmm.
is that if you try and push something away, like if I put a box next to you and I told you to push it away, the act of pushing it away will always keep you touching it. Because
like
you're
that.
never actually getting further away.
Yeah.
And that's a very significant, like, that's a very significant thing because, like you said,
Yeah.
you have to just sit with it and be like, okay, like, let's open it and let's go through the box.
Yeah. Yeah, and you don't have to sit with it alone. Like that's why we're here. Or even if your friends can hold some of that, like maybe they don't know how, and that's where sometimes we get a rub or frustration or things. But there are people out there you can sit with. You don't have to do this alone, especially if you don't feel like you know how to let it be. Because I know some people, there is a difference between wallowing and like making space and processing. So that is different too.
For anybody who doesn't feel like they know how to sit with somebody else in grief, one of the things that I love to do is to always ask people to talk about it. Like, if you lost a person, if you lost a thing, talk about it. Talk about what you liked, talk about what you appreciated, talk about stories and memories and experiences connected to it, because all of that helps us connect with why we feel what we feel. And that's part of how we allow ourselves to feel it and allow ourselves to process it.
And there's something beautiful about being able to like ask people questions instead of just saying you're sorry. Because like you didn't do anything wrong most of the time. Like the person that's trying to be there with you. But it's like connecting with that it meant something to them. It's like, wow, they really meant a lot to you. Or that this really meant a lot to you, whatever it is. Being like, what was that like? Yeah, what was the best part of that when that was happening? Or yeah, like what do you remember most about it? And it's really beautiful. Like there is a ton of emotion there, but it's really beautiful to hear how deeply we can feel about people or places or dreams or things like that. It's a really cool space to enter with people.
It's remarkable how much you can learn, like even in being the one who's joining someone else. Like whenever you're joining someone else, they benefit, but also you benefit from getting to be a part of that shared experience of processing and hearing and witnessing what's there.
One thing that comes up as we talk about this is, well, partially going back to your metaphor, I use a slightly different metaphor, but of kind of like a rubber band. And it's like you're in contact with it, but it also snaps back harder. And one of the ways I think of that is like if this emotion is showing up, it's trying to tell you something. And so if you're ignoring it, just like a little kid or something, you're ignoring, or trying to push them away, like they're going to get louder and louder and louder because they're trying to be heard. So it's like, that's when people generally like come to us. I would say that's pretty common. It's like, okay, I can't ignore it anymore. And so just thinking about it that way too, it's like, I really love to think of emotions as like energy and information. They're showing up, they're trying to tell us something about what's happening around us or what's going on. So like, how can we listen in a way that is like open and curious, inquisitive? Like, what is this emotion trying to tell me? I think there's been a correlation or connection in our culture, even with language, that like being uncomfortable is unsafe. And things that are unpleasant are unsafe. And I think it might be a very natural thing that we come to, like, especially as a lot of us are kids and we go through something, maybe conflict in the home, say, or could be abuse, could be neglect, could be different things. And those things, when we're a kid and we're depending on other people, like those can be unsafe. But I think we carry that to when we're adults, where we have more independence and more autonomy and everything is different. And that's something we can unlearn, where it's like, just because it's uncomfortable doesn't mean I'm not safe. So I can sit with this person in their discomfort, in their pain, in their sadness, in these emotions that like generally we don't enjoy. And it's safe to sit here. Yeah, I just thought that was pertinent because that comes up a lot, is like this sense of it feels safe, but generally the mind is equating safety with comfort. And that's not very helpful all the time.
Yeah. It all harkens back to the classic, your brain wants to keep you safe and alive, not happy. And it's really valuable to figure out how to distinguish between this is uncomfortable and unsafe, and this is uncomfortable and okay.
Yeah, there's space for both. Because some things that are uncomfortable maybe aren't safe, but a lot of them are. Especially when it comes to emotions.
Yeah. Our emotions are ours. And when you use a piece of yourself, or when you connect with a piece of yourself that you're not familiar with, it feels foreign. But it's still yours. It's still part of you. And the more you allow yourself to make space for that, the more you can become familiar with it. The more it can be like, oh yeah, here's here is this emotion, here's this grief and all of the other nuanced things that are part of it. And I can touch them and I can feel them and I can be present with them without running away, without avoiding, without any of these other things that take me out of them.
Thinking of like a practice for this, one way that I like to visualize it. So when we're pushing away, you're saying we're in contact with it, but we're also kind of tensed up. Like we have to press. And so a lot of times when we have discomfort in our bodies, we tense up. And one of the ways that I like to visualize it is imagine, like, kind of locate where it is in your body. Where is that emotion living mainly? Maybe it's tension in your chest, or across your forehead, or behind your eyes, or in your stomach. Maybe there's a knot there. So let's go with the knot in the stomach. So maybe say there's that. What I like to imagine is as I breathe in, I'm breathing space around that knot. And as I breathe out, I just kind of relax a little if I can. And every time I breathe in a little more space around it for just letting it be there. But it just reminding ourselves too that like our body contains all of this. So in our mind, it feels like they're so much bigger than us and they're going to overwhelm us, overtake us. But it's like we're holding it in our bodies. So it can't be bigger than us. It's just part of our experience in our bodies. Can we create a little bit of space around it? Relax our body a little bit to hold it. That can be a really helpful way to like physically start to stop pushing it away. It's like, okay, can I just notice, track it in my body, and then make a little space for it in my body?
One of the things that stands out there is this idea that if we can have agency in relation to what we're feeling, then we can move through it. Versus if we feel suffocated, trapped by, crushed by, defeated by, controlled by what we're feeling, then we feel a lot less powerless. It feels like there's a lot less we can do. And so putting yourself in a position where it's like, it's okay. This is within me.
Yeah.
I can do this. Makes a huge difference.
And I love the dialogue there too, because that inner dialogue is much more supportive and kind and like coming from a place of strength. I like to think about myself as, I mean, we are mammals. We have very similar nervous systems to like our dogs, cats, things like that. And so it's like, can I even, if my dog was scared, or my child, like I don't have a kid, but my dog is my kid right now. But like if you have kids, maybe that could be a helpful way. But it's like, if they were scared, how would I sit with them? Or what would I say to them? Like, would I put a hand on their back or on their arm or on their heart and just say like, hey, I'm right here with you. Like, it's okay. You're going to be okay. You can do this. Like, can I talk to myself that way and remind myself that like I'm capable and I'm here. I'm going to be okay, and show up for myself. That can be really powerful.
Part of what I love about what you just talked about with like your dog or with kids is that it's really easy to identify someone else grieving. Like we can see these tangible signs of like, oh, there's pain there. There's some sort of suffering that's happening right there. We can make space for that. But I think it's much easier to miss it within ourselves. Which leaves us with the question, how do you identify when you're grieving?
Yeah. Great question, Jacob.
Thank you.
And it's how do we do that? How do you do that?
I grew up in the culture of toxic masculinity, of like, be tough, keep going, work hard, like, if there's no pain, there is no gain, so just muscle your way through it. And it has been, I think in general, I've always been more of a feeler than not. And therefore, despite growing up and all of that, I've always still been like, yeah, I feel emotions very big. And therefore, what I've had to work a lot on has been practicing being like, oh, I'm feeling something here. I should slow down and be curious. So for me, it has been trying to pay attention to when something feels off, when something feels like it's holding me down, when something feels heavy. Do I actually take time to see what that is, to make the space for it,
Mm.
and explore what it feels like?
Yeah.
And I think the more I've practiced that, the easier it's been to be able to look and be like, oh, I think I'm feeling really sad about something I've lost. I'm feeling really sad about something that's different than it was, which is grief. And I don't always call it grief, because a lot of the time I will look at like the core of like it's either sad or I'm hurt or I'm just in pain, and then I try and make space for that and allow myself to appreciate that. Yeah, that was really nice how that was, and now things are different.
Mm.
And different now can feel really bad. Later, it will also feel different.
What I've noticed lately, so I have a friend who's moving, one of my best friends ever in the whole world. What I've noticed lately is that I am kind of stuck to my to-do list.
Mm.
And I have a pattern I've noticed over time that I have a pattern of when I am trying to avoid something, or I don't want to think about it, or it hasn't happened quite yet. And so I'm like, maybe I don't feel like I should be grieving yet. I'm like, to do, like just get really wrapped up in doing. And so as I noticed that recently, I've been like, slow down, just like you were saying. It's like, oh yeah, I'm trying to outrun this. So that's one thing that I notice is like, I don't want this to happen. These are kind of the thoughts that show up as like, this is stupid. I hate this. I don't want this to happen. Why? How can I fix it? How can I change it? And then just some of it is just like sad and like feeling defeated or helpless. It's like, I can't change it. And I even understand it. And I can understand it and still hate it. And I can love it for them and hate it for me. But just noticing all of those different emotions, that there's like anger, frustration, annoyance, the bargaining of like, I wish I could, what can I do? How can I fix it? Kind of recognizing when those things all seem to come up at the same time for me, that's where I'm like, oh yeah. Yep, there it is again. This is, yeah, I'm gonna have to grieve this. Or I am grieving it. And I think too, for me, labeling it grief is really helpful to remind myself that it's a process, that I like, that this will come in waves. It's not just this moment that I'm feeling this. I won't feel it this way forever by any means, but there will be moments along the way, just like on the ocean where a wave comes and then it goes, and another wave comes and goes. And that's okay. That's part of it. Like, that I don't have to get over it or just feel it right now and then be like, okay, I'm good. And then when it comes back, be like, why is this still happening? It's like, well, because it's grief. It's change, and it's different than how it was. And it makes so much sense that my mind wants things to be a certain way, because all our minds do. And that we like consistency and routine, and we like change in some ways when it's more positive change. But we also have a hard time with change as humans. So I think those are some of the things that I recognize for myself. And that's when I start to be like, oh yeah, grief is here again. It's visiting me again.
Allowing ourselves to make space for that, to make space for the grief that we're feeling, the emotions that are connected to it, is so valuable. And it's so underrated, and it's something that we need to practice more. And it's something that there's not a perfect, like, this is the right way to do it. Yeah. There are many right ways to allow yourself to work through what you're feeling.
Yes.
And like a fundamental piece that all of them kind of have is that you have to be willing to do it. You have to be willing to engage with what's uncomfortable, to confront the parts of yourself that are like, nope, we're not going there.
Yeah.
And I think the other big piece is that we can benefit a ton from being willing to ask for support.
Yeah.
Being willing to professionally, or just like a friend, a family member, be like, hey, I'm feeling this and it's heavy and I need somebody to be with. I need somebody to talk to.
Yeah. I totally agree. And I was just thinking of like when we move towards it and make space for it and allow it too, there is this space for appreciation of like how cool that I got to have something
Mm-hmm.
so meaningful. Like, and it doesn't have to be like, wow, this feels good.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just like there can be the space of appreciation or gratitude for being like, wow, that's pretty neat that I got to experience something so meaningful.
Oh, yeah.
Or a
So true.
friendship so close, or a dream so big, or something. Yeah. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We want to hear from you, our listeners, who, if you're still here, thank you for being here. When you think about grief, how do you think about it? In what are ways that you have allowed yourself to work through or sit with the grief that you experienced?
Yeah, I'd love to know. What's the
Other than
littlest thing you've grieved? What's the biggest
Ooh.
thing?
There's yes. Okay. Rather than diving down a hole.
Yep.
I just want to say thank you for being here. We appreciate you. And whatever time of day it is, wherever you are, have a lovely rest of your day.
Yes, and we'll see you next time on the Space for It.